Roccia is a support of sub DPS, who primarily buffs basic and havoc damage. How does she work? How do we build her? And how strong is she? We'll dive into all of that with math. Roccia's kit is incredibly linear. Build up her Forte and use it to bounce 3 times. Forte can be built up in several ways. Basic attacks, charging your heavy attack, intro, and skill. Her intro can conveniently be followed up with basic attack 4, which grants an entire 100 Forte. As such, the core combo is intro, basic attack, skill, and then 3 bounces, with her liberation sprinkled wherever.
Mamma mia!
Speaking of which, her liberation, on top of dealing heavy attack damage, applies a buff to the entire team that grants up to 200 flat attack, scaling based on her crit rate. This scales from 0 to 200 between 50 to 70 crit rate, so make sure you gear her up to get the most out of the buff. Roccia's outro gives a havoc and basic attack amplified, making her an obvious pairing with Camellia, though she can be used with Havoc Rover and Dungeon to lesser effectiveness as well. Additionally, it grants a utility skill override, which deals a flat 100 damage in total, while sucking enemies towards its center. It's like a portable Genshin out in your pocket. And that's about all you need to know about her kit. Extremely linear, like I said. Let's look into builds in the next section. We'll start out by talking about echo builds, because this is an important baseline for the rest of the calculations. When supporting Camellia, there are 2 main competing sets: Moonlit Clouds and Midnight Veil. Moonlit Clouds offers slightly more buffs to Camellia, while Midnight Veil gives its holder more personal damage at the cost of having less outgoing buffs. So, which is better? With the generous assumption that Roccia's Echo Substats are at the same level as Camellia, as well as that they're both using their signature weapons, Moonlit overtakes Midnight Veil around the board. In this team dynamic, she just doesn't do enough personal damage to make up for the lesser buffs she'd give with Midnight Veil. While the difference is kinda small, it's disappointing as the set was obviously made for her. But wait, that was in a team with Shorekeeper, who buffs the main DPS relatively more than the sub DPS due to how her stellar realm works. What about with Verena? Unfortunately, it's the same story. Moonlit is still preferable over Midnight Veil in this case. On top of Moonlit leading to more damage, it also grants some energy regen and more resonance energy from the echo itself, easing the energy regen requirement from 19% to 2%. As such, this makes Moonlit the preferable set, without even considering the fact that you should have more investment for your main DPS than sub DPS, which would only tip the scales more. However, when paired with weaker teammates such as Havoc Rover, Midnight Veil pulls ahead slightly. Let's swing back to weapons. The following calculations will use Moonlit Clouds as the base echo set. Her signature weapon, Tragic Comedy, offers quite a substantial increase over Abyss Surges, and a slightly smaller increase over Verity's Handle. Mercado is not relevant for her unless running R5, at which point you can skip 1 bounce if desired. Substats, as usual, are nothing out of the ordinary. Crit is a top priority, with attack percent next. Heavy percent is not far behind attack percent, and will be a higher priority if you do not have her signature weapon. For skill leveling, prioritize her Forte, followed by Liberation, and skill. Basic attack and intro are the lowest priorities. Next, let's look at some team damage comparisons. In the following comparisons, Roccia will be using Midnight Veil in the Rover teams, or Moonlit Clouds with the Camellia teams. As you can see, the Camellia Roccia Shorekeeper team is the most powerful Havoc team, but only by a small margin. The Sanhua team is only 1% behind, though that's with Sanhua on Blazing Brilliance. It'd be another 1% behind if she was on Emerald of Genesis instead. Havoc Rover isn't too far off, all things considered, and still has room to grow when S6 is attainable. It's a bit sad, isn't it? With her signature weapon in the one team she is nichely designed for, with an echo set dedicated entirely to her, she only marginally pulls ahead of Sanhua. I suppose that's just a testament to how strong Sanhua is. What about her sequence nodes though? Here's a graph showing her personal damage as well as team DPS per sequence, with an additional line for team DPS when using Midnight Veil. Note that her personal damage point at S6 should be taken with a grain of salt, as it extends her rotations with more bounces. And at S1, her personal damage decreases as she no longer has to use basic 4 in each rotation. As a sub DPS, the total gain in team DPS is just 35% from S0 to S6. It's recommended to invest in your main DPS first if you're pulling for power. But if you just want to bounce around, more power to you. As for Midnight Veil versus Moonlit, after S4, Midnight Veil becomes relatively stronger of a set. But that assumes your Camellia is S0. If your Camellia has sequences, it may be better to just stay on Moonlit. And that concludes this guide. To be honest, I'm a bit disappointed by how linear her rotation is. And she just feels a bit underwhelming in terms of numbers. But hey, at least she's cute. Anyways, if you want to look into the specifics of the calculations or rotations, please check out the DPS calculator, link in the description. See you guys next time. Bye bye!